All right, thank you all for joining. So we're going to try and share some ideas on Haggadah. Some of them will be sort of general ideas that I hope are usable during the Seder, but I also think would like to share several ideas as we go on, which are particularly, I think, relevant this year, because I think that there is an obvious important challenge this year in terms of every year the Seder is something which we have a responsibility to bring it alive. That's the whole idea. But I think there's a natural sense this year that people want to be connected and inspired, particularly with what's going on in Israel. And I think that's important to find ideas that connect to that, if you like, almost channel that feeling. So I'm going to share hopefully several ideas that, again, I generally just think the policy I have with sharing Divrei Torah is quite simple, really. If it speaks to me, I like to share it. It's not very complicated. So I'll share with you things that speak to me, things that I find moving, and hopefully you'll be able to, if you can take a few ideas, then that will be good. So just as a kind of almost by way of introduction, Rav Tzvi Hirsch Ferber in his Sefer Kerem HaTzvi, Tzvi Hirsch Ferber was a fascinating character. He was a Rav of Soho. He was, honestly. He was Rav in London. In about, I don't know, like 70, 80 years ago. He wrote the series of songs called Kerem HaTzvi. And he engaged with all the dilemmas and difficulties that go with sometimes being the Rav of a Kehillah. But he also has a very, very keen eye and perception for almost like current affairs and the current state of world Jewry. Now, he's writing a long time ago. I don't know exactly whether it's 100 years ago, thereabouts, maybe a bit less. I think probably a little bit less than that, but either way, he says the following very, very simple but powerful idea. We know that we have the four cups. The four cups, of course, the four kosas, the four cups correspond to the four expressions of redemption. They are also understood to correspond to the four classic types of exile, the four forms of exile we've experienced as a people, right? So the Egyptian exile and he uses that as the first one. The Persian exile, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, right? And he says that he says we've drunk those cups, right? Of all those exiles and that persecution, we've drunk those cups every year throughout our long history, and we've always said those words that Hashem saves us from their hands. But what about the fifth cup? The fifth cup, the cup of Eliyahu Hanavi, which is if you like, the mysterious cup. There are many mysterious things about that fifth cup. It's present on the table, but we don't drink it. What is it there for? What does it symbolize? There is, of course, the fifth word in the pasuk as well, right? If you go back to the original source of the four cups, the four expressions of redemption, the fifth one is, and I will bring you, vehevesi, I will bring you into the land. So Rav Ferber says as follows. He says that the fifth cup corresponds to the internal exiles that we have. The idea that as Jews, often we create, unfortunately, we sometimes create forms of exile for ourselves in terms of internal strife, in terms of perhaps those who oppose doing the right thing and ensuring that we grow as a people and come together as a people, but especially we come together for the purpose of serving Hashem. And he says that if you look, and we actually say this at the end of he hints at this, the end of the Haftorah on Shabbos Haggadah, we say, which is right at the end of Sefer Malachi, which is the last book of the Nevi'im, of the prophets, right? We say, V'heishiv leiv avos al bonim, v'leiv bonim al avosom, which is Eliyahu Hanavi's role. Eliyahu Hanavi will be the one who comes and binds us together as a people, so that the fathers are returned to their children, the children are returned to their fathers. That is a central thing that Eliyahu Hanavi will do. And he says that this is this is what the fifth cup symbolizes, and why it is that we focus on Eliyahu Hanavi in that role. It's a very powerful idea, because we can, during the Seder, we focus on exile, external exile, right? Persecution and redemption and freedom from that persecution. But then we have to also ask ourselves, so what are we going to become as a result? And the way he sees it is that's what the fifth cup does. It sits there on the table and it reminds us of Eliyahu Hanavi. And it reminds us that, yes, we are free from slavery. But what are we going to do internally? How are we going to build ourselves as a people? How are we going to become? What nation do we want to be? Right? He says that that the idea is that there is a difference between sheker and emes. Is a very famous idea. The idea that sheker, the letters of sheker, shin, kuf, and resh, they are at the end of the aleph base, because right at the end, you go through the Aleph base and you get to the very end. He says, right at the end of the exile, of all the exiles, before Mashiach comes, he says there'll be an abundance of sheker, a lot of falsehood out there, and all sorts of false directions. It's at the end of the Aleph base, very clever, right? Whereas MS, right, is the beginning and the middle and the end. And that's because it's difficult to see it. Yeah, it's there all the time. It's there at the beginning, it's there in the middle, it's there at the end, but someone has to bring it together. You have to work at it. So where you have that abundance of sheker right at the end, just before Mashiach comes, you've got to have some force, or we have to work on the idea of bringing together that sense of truth, fighting for the truth, fighting for what's worth fighting for. And he talks about how that we need leaders and Talmidei Chachomim who can guide us in that. That the idea is, Chazal say in Shabbos, Masechah Shabbos, that the seal of Hashem is emes, right? That the signet, the seal of Hashem is emes, is truth. He says, Remez, this is a hint that the sealing and the end of the other Aleph base will be with the letters of MS in truth, and not with the letters of Sheker, of course, because when you go to Shin Kuf Reish, you get to a Taf right at the end. So you've got those letters there, but there's that Taf of MS which is there and able to turn things on its head at the end. So he says that's the fifth cup. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, profound idea, I think. So second idea, and again, my aim is really, and I've done this as in the past, is yes, there are themes that hopefully you'll see will develop together, but they're also usable as bits, if that makes sense, rather than having to remember the whole thing at once, right? So another idea that is expressed by the Chasam Sofer, it's also quoted actually in the Kerem HaTzvi, but it's an idea from the Chasam Sofer. So the Chasam Sofer says that what is it about the fact that we do not say a bracha on the Haggadah? This is a very famous question. It's a mitzvah, and why should we not say a bracha on the Haggadah? And he answers it in the following. In other words, the bracha on the actual on the mitzvah of Sipri Yetzias Mitzrayim, the mitzvah of retelling the story of the Exodus. Why do we not say a bracha on that? And he answers it in the following way. He says that we know there's a famous debate between Rav and Shmuel in the Gemara in Psochim, Daf Kuf Tez Zayin, as to what it means that you're maschel bignus and Messiah b'shvach, that you begin with how difficult things were, and you end with how wonderful things were. That's the trajectory of the Haggadah, and there's a debate there between Rav and Shmuel what that means. So Rav says that the low point you begin with is mitchila ovdei avodah zarah, is the fact that we worshipped idols. It's on a spiritual plane, right? Shmuel says that the beginning, that is the low point, is avodim hayinu, that we were slaves. So it's a famous debate in the sense that two different perspectives. They're both true, right? It's not a debate that you say it's one or the other. It's both have, right? It's different perspectives. Either it's our spiritual state that we started off as idol worshippers, terach, etc., right? Or it's our physical slavery, right? Those two different perspectives that exist. And then we say, and now Hashem has brought us close to his service, right? So he says like this: just as we have to see ourselves on this night as if we left Egypt, we also have to see ourselves and recognize the fact and imagine as if we were, it's quite a strange, interesting idea, idol worshippers, right? As if we are literally becoming Jewish, converting to Judaism, right? And that Hashem has now brought us clear, right? Through the mitzvahs, through us to his service, through the mitzvahs of this night. What happens when a ger converts? When do they make the bracha in the mikveh? Afterwards, only after tefillah, which is why all tefillahs, the bracha is made afterwards, right? Even really, you should make it before. Every mitzvah make a bracha before. But because of the tefillah of gerim, when they go to the mikveh, they have to make the bracha afterwards because they're not Jewish beforehand. So they can only make the bracha afterwards, right? So that's why all tefillah is made, the bracha is always made afterwards, okay? Because you can't say, V'tzivonu has commanded us, he's not yet Jewish. So too, he says, it's the same thing. What a beautiful idea. He says that when we can't start the beginning of the night by saying Asher Kedeshanu Mitzvah Tzivanu, the Sapeh B'Yetzias Mitzrayim, because we're, so to speak, not yet Jewish. We're still in the frame of, we're still in the frame of at the beginning of idol worshippers. Yeah, we are still reacting it to such an extent that we can't say it at the beginning. And that is why the bracha on the mitzvah of telling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is when? It's at the end of the Haggadah. Asher Ga'alanu, we do say a bracha, right? At the end of the Haggadah, we say a bracha, Asher Ga'alanu, before the second cup. And that is the bracha on the mitzvah. So it's like emerging from the mikveh, so to speak. Yeah, we become Jewish now. And he says, then Nielsen, he brings with this another very beautiful idea. he says that is what's going on with the order of the Haggadah. What do we say? Holach mo'anya. Holach mo'anya. We say this is the poor man's bread, and at the same time, just before that, we break the middle matzah, yeah, before we tell the story, and critically, before we've said the bracha of Hamotzi. Why? Why do we do that? Even though we're not eating it yet, but it's symbolic, right? That it's as if we're not yet Jewish, and therefore we break the matzah without bracha. We would never do that normally. We make the bracha, yeah, and then you cut the challah, then you break the matzah. Only on Seder night we break a matzah before a bracha, because we're not yet there. We're still, we're still in this place where we haven't yet entered the covenant, so to speak, become commanded to that extent. So that's the approach of the Chasam Sofer, resolving why it is we don't say the bracha. We don't say the bracha. I think the last bit is perhaps the idea of the Kerem HaTzvi on the Chasam Sofer about the matzah. Okay, so Rav Shimon Schwab was also a tremendously powerful works. He's written several different Mayam Beis HaShoeva, and if you haven't got his Sefer, which is in English, his Pirush on Tefillah, it's a really worthwhile investment. It's a beautiful commentary on Tefillah. So much in there. It's really tremendous resource. It's in English. It's published by ArtScroll of Shimon Schwab's commentary on Tefillah. You can look it up. And he gave a series of shiurim. He was a rabbi in Washington Heights. And he gave a series of shiurim which were recorded, and they were made into a sefer. And it's just very, it's real stuff. It's a learning. You have to learn it, but it's all in English and it's accessible and it's tremendous ideas there. He says, he tries to solve the following question, which actually someone asked me this year, and I was pleased to see an answer to it. We know that we have this kind of like dichotomy with the matzah, right? We have this problem of understanding the matzah. On the one hand, it's the bread of slavery. Okay, this is the bread of slavery. And why is it the bread of slavery? Because there's no time to bake proper bread. We know that. They didn't have time to bake because they were busy working. There was no lunch hour. You just had to throw it together, stick it in the oven, couple of minutes, and you eat it how it is, right? That's lechem only. It's the bread of affliction, right? At the same time, it becomes symbolic of the redemption. And we say that why do we eat the matzah? Rabban Gamliel, what does it say, right? Because the dough didn't have time to rise when they were driven out of Mitzrayim. So what is it? Which one is it, right? What is the matzah? Is the matzah because they ate it when they were slaves? Or is it the matzah symbolic of freedom because they had to rush? What's going on? And also, it's just a practical question. This was the question this person asked me. They said, what do you mean they didn't have time to rise? I mean, it doesn't take that long, right? Even if you're carrying the matzah with you, even if you're carrying the dough with you, right? You wait till it rises, then you can pause and put it in the oven, whatever. They must have a time. They have even a few hours that night. They would have time to break bread. You understand? That's the question. Okay. So he suggests like this. He says what happened was they left Egypt. They were very wealthy, all the gold and silver, whatever, and they were busy. They had to pack up and leave, right? They didn't have time to bake properly. So what did they take with them? They took with them the dough. That's all, right? They said, well, okay, when it gets down, it will rise and whatever. And during that time, after that, once it's risen, we will be able to bake it. But as they're on the way out, they open the bags expecting the dough to have risen in the meantime, and it did not rise. It did not rise. Okay, so it was a miracle, and it did not rise. And they ended up baking the dough into the same flat pieces of matzah that they'd been eating all those years in slavery. Why? So that it was a message from Hashem that you've now left slavery, physical slavery, but now you're servants of Hashem. So it became forever the symbol of what real servitude is, what it means to be a servant of Hashem. You understand? It's the same thing. It's the idea that we are in the hands of Hashem, that Hashem controls our destiny. So that is the point. It is the very same thing. It's the thing that you were forced to eat in Egypt because you were slaves, right? Because we were slaves. And then Hashem orchestrates it that you end up eating the same thing when you've left. Because if you think now that you have freedom to do what you like and you end up behaving in a way that is not appropriate, then what have you done? You've missed the whole point. You've exchanged a lifestyle of oppression for another lifestyle of oppression. In other words, oppression of whatever, of just being constrained by all of the limitations of this world. And that's, he says, the idea of how you resolve the matzah being 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 both the bread of affliction and also the bread of freedom. Yeah, so that's how that's his solution to this problem. Okay, another idea from Rav Schwab is on the Manishtana. So the Manishtana and the answer to the Manishtana is confusing. And again, this is a question which many deal with. The question that is asked seems to be, or at least it seems that we should interpret it. As the question of the Chacham, or of the wise son. Why? Because the answer we give, which is Avodim Hayinu Lefara b'Mitzrayim, okay, is expressed in the Torah. In the Torah, it's a part of the pasuk. It's the beginning part of the pasuk in the Torah, which is the response to the son who asks, "What are these Eidos and Chukim and Mishpatim?" Let me just look it up. Just worth seeing this pasuk a second. Because we know the 4 sons are all found in the Torah, right? There are different places in the Torah, right? So in Parshas Vayischanan and Pasuk Perek Vov, Pasuk Chof Aleph, Perek Vov Pasuk Chof Aleph, you have a second. Yeah, it says, when your son asks you tomorrow, and of course tomorrow means in the future, what all these commandments that Hashem has told you to do. That is the question of the Chacham. That's what it is. This is the wise son's question, right? That's what's going on here, right? You shall tell your son, you tell your child, we were servants to Pharaoh Mitzrayim, but and Hashem took us out with a strong arm. So if you work backwards, right? It's not that complicated, think about it. You work backwards. If the answer is Avodim Hayinu, you with me? If the answer is Avodim Hayinu, we were slaves, right? Then logically, the question or the set of questions that Avodim Hayinu is answering, which we know in the Torah is the answer to the wise son, right? The questions must be the questions of the wise son too, or in some way. That's what they're trying to convey. Of course, it's not the same exactly as the wise son asks, but it would seem that is what we are trying to convey. Okay. Okay, well, fine. So what are we doing? What do we do with that? So what relevance to that have? So he says it's a long piece. As I say, this is in his commentary on the Torah, but I'm only going to take out a little bit of it that I think has got a very important idea for us. He says that if you look at what's going on in the Manishtana as a whole, take a step back and look at those 4 questions together, okay? They are all about why it is that the manner and method of eating is different this night. That's the one thing they have in common, right? That's what they're all about. They're all about food and how we eat. Chametz and matzah and leaning and dipping and whatever. And even in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when they had a different question, they asked about roast meat, why we have to have roast meat. We don't have that question nowadays, but that was a question in the Mishnah that they had. Even it's also about eating, right? So it's all about the manner of eating. So we can bring all the wonderful jokes about Jews and food and everything else, fine. Okay, but it's all about food, right? That's what it's about, the manner of eating, okay? Now, he says like this, okay, it's not about what it is we're eating in the sense of like the Korban Pesach or whatever or not. It's about the manner and the way we're eating, right? If a person wants to understand, he says, sort of the difference between this night and other nights, right? The only difference is that the rest of the year, Hashem doesn't mind how we eat. As long as we eat kosher food, the manner in which we eat, right, is not prescribed, if you know what I mean. It's not prescribed. You can choose, right? You can choose what to eat and you can choose how to eat it. It's only on this night that it is prescribed in a particular way, okay? And therefore, he says, what is the depth of the question of the wise son? The wise son understands that we've left Egypt. He understands that, right? Because he's wise. So he knows we left Egypt, and he knows that the obvious corollary, the obvious result of leaving Egypt and Hashem taking us out is what? Is to say thank you. That's the basics of a clever child, right? The clever child understands if someone does you a favor, you show gratitude. So those 2 things, the wise son doesn't have to be told, right? I understand why I've left Egypt, and I understand why I have to thank Hashem. So what's his question? His question is, why is it if what we're doing really is just a meal of thanksgiving. That's basically how a logical, clever child is going to understand what we're doing around this table. We're giving thanks for our redemption. And if we're giving thanks for redemption, so why are we doing all of these funny things? Why are we eating? Why is the prescription? Why are we prescribed in all these ways? Does that make sense? If it's just it should be like a Purim Suda. You understand? And the Chacham understands that. He knows what a Purim Suda is. I mean, you understand that? Okay, great. Let's have a party. Let's celebrate. Let's thank Hashem through whatever. But why is it that we have to prescribe our eating this way? Okay, and he says that that in order to understand what the answer to the Chacham is, you have to understand that what the author of the Haggadah, the Baal Haggadah, does with the answer in Avodim Hayinu, right, is he stops in the middle of what the Torah itself says, which is incredibly surprising. The Torah, when it gives the answer to the wise son, it says, "You shall tell your children, you shall tell your son, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Hashem took us out, and Hashem gave us signs and wonders." It carries on. And he took us out of there to give us the land that he swore to our ancestors, and he commanded us to do all these things to fear Hashem, so it should be good for us the rest of all our lives. Now, all of that, most of that is not there in Haggadah, and this is astonishing. This is the answer. The Torah says the answer to the wise son. We have explained that the questioning process would seem to be, this is the question of the wise son. So why don't we just replicate the whole answer that the Torah gives? You can look it up. It's Wise Chaim, Perek Vav. Why don't we just repeat it? So he says the answer is like this: that the essence of what we're trying to convey, and this is the response to the question of why the food is prescribed in this way, right? Is that the depth of the Exodus is a revelation of Hashem's presence. That Hashem took us out of there. It was Hashem who took us out through this revelation. And therefore, our job on this night is to understand that. It's not just to celebrate and give thanksgiving. We need to do that as well. But we need to understand the depth of the miracles. We need to appreciate the manner in which we left, right? The manner in which we left. And that is why the author of the Haggadah stops in the middle and says, we were servants to Pharaoh, and Hashem took us out. Vayotzenu Hashem Elokeinu from Mishon, because that is the key point for this purpose in response to the question and what we are trying to achieve on this night, right? We are trying to achieve the fact that we understand that Hashem, the revelation of Hashem's presence to us, and that needs us to delve into in depth and understand the details. And that's why the Haggadah stops after quoting the first part or the first pasuk and says, and Hashem not taking us out, we'd still be slaves. And even if we're very wise and everything else, we have a mitzvah l'saper b'yetzias Mitzrayim, about Yetzias Mitzrayim. What does it mean, b'yetzias Mitzrayim? B'yetzias Mitzrayim, says Rav Schwab, means to go into it, like within. Mitzvah aleinu l'saper, right? B'yetzias Mitzrayim, like deep into it, right? Within. We have to go into it ourselves and work out and figure it out and understand what's going on. And therefore, he says, that is the answer to the Chacham. That is why this is different to any other meal of thanksgiving, right? The Torah tells us, and is particular about the manner in which we eat. He says, this is the real answer to the wise son. All of the details and all the particular points and the prescription and the dipping and the leaning and all these things that he's asking about, why is that necessary? It's all there to demonstrate the revelation of Hashem's presence and the fact, because all these details have relevance and they're symbolic and they mean things, etc., and that we have a mitzvah to talk not just about Yetzias Mitzrayim, but be Yetzias Mitzrayim within the Exodus from Egypt, right? That's what he's going on, okay? Do you understand? So just to summarize what Rav Schwab has said, he's basically explained to us that if you look carefully, the Avodim Hayinu is the answer in the Torah to the wise son, which means Manish Tana must also be the wise son's questions, effectively. What is the wise son's question? Wise son understands redemption, say thank you. He gets that, right? He gets that. So the message really is, he's asking, but why all these details? Let us just have a meal. Why are you prescribing us in all these different ways and do these things in different ways and the leaning and the thing and the eating? And that we answer because it doesn't matter how wise you are, right? It's much more. It's more than just saying thank you. It's appreciating the revelation of Hashem's presence and everything that he did to get us to the point of freedom. In other words, the details, right? All of those details of the miracles, which is what we then do the rest of the Seder. That's what we do. You understand? So that's how we are effectively responding to the wise son. That's what he says. And therefore, it's our responsibility, and we understand this as the priority. Our responsibility is to delve into it. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to go into detail, right? By the way, Rav Soloveitchik says that the interesting manner in which the Haggadah is set up, because really, logically, you would expect it to just be, one continuum. We just read the psukim. Why don't we just have someone there with a Sefer Torah or a Chumash and just laying the whole of Parsha Shmos v'Eirav Bo B'Shalach, right? That would be the logical thing to do if you think about it. Just tell the story. He says because that's not enough. You've got to tell the story, but you also have to learn. You have to learn. If you don't do it through a learning process, you haven't done it properly. How do we do it through a learning process? We do it through classic learning. We have a pasuk, and then we have the Torah Shabbal Peh, the medrash on that pasuk, and that's how we expound all of the pasukim. That is the structure of the whole Haggadah. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. And I don't know if he says it quite these words, but I think this is what the depth of what he means. If you don't do it that way, you remain passive. Okay, we have this concept called the Yam HaTalmud, which means the sea of the learning and the Gemara, right? It's like a flowing sea. And we have a response, and it's continuously expanding those streams. Every time you say a Dvar Torah, or every time you contribute to Torah, right? You're joining the stream, you're in the river. So they've got to think of it like this sort of metaphor. If you just tell a story on Seder night, you just read the Psukim, then what you're doing is you're standing on the riverbank. You're like watching it go past, right? And that's good at a certain level. That's good. That's great. Like I've said the words and I've appreciated it, but it's much better if you're in the water. Like it's much better if you're like learning you're learning something new and you're delving into it and you're involving yourself. And that's what it's called. That's what it means to go deeply into the Haggadah. You understand? I'm not a passive now. I'm active. And if you think about the way the Haggadah is structured, it's all about active learning. It's all about active learning, just the way we do things and the things, the food we eat and everything else, and all the things that we do that are active, and we uncover the matzahs and we're active all the time, right? Because it's active learning. That's what's going on, right? And we become therefore part of the story rather than just being passive observers to the story. Okay, now 3 ideas which I think are particularly relevant to this year. Number 1, Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer, right? So Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer is the story of the Chachamim in Bnei Brak. Now we've all heard over the years, like endless, more than me, different ideas about Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer, but I just want to share with you a beautiful idea from a Haggadah called the Nachlas. I think it's called Nachla. Or this is actually an idea of someone Yalkut Menachem, Reb Menachem Tzvi Taksin, I think his name was, and he says the following idea. He says, what is it about? He asks effectively 2 questions. Number 1, why does it say that they were involving themselves in the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kol Oso Halayla, that word Oso, that night? What does it mean, that night? Why didn't it say Kol Halayla, all night? What is the word Oso, all that night? Number 1. Second question he asks is, why did their students, the Talmidim, have to come and tell them that it's time for Kriyas Shema, right? Surely they themselves would have seen that it got light outside. Yeah, had no many windows. Okay, so he says like this, that we know, and we know this historically, this is what he says, that these Talmidei Chachomim all lived at the time of the Hadrianic persecutions, Adrianus Caesar, right? Hadrianic persecutions were horrific. They were horrific, right? Time of Beitar, the destruction of Beitar, Rabbi Akiva, we know what happened to Rabbi Akiva, the way he was killed, murdered, died al Kiddush Hashem by the Romans, right? So they lived at a time of horrendous persecution, right? And they weren't allowed to keep mitzvahs. So what happens on this Seder night, he says, they have to perform the Seder night, but they hid themselves in a house in Bnei Brak, which was far away from Yerushalayim. That's the point, where the center of the Jewish community was. They were far away from them. This is one approach. There are other approaches. This is his approach, right? And what happened was they hid themselves in some place where they would not be disturbed. They would not be discovered. And therefore, they were in a place without windows. They might have been in a cave or somewhere else, whatever, somewhere dark, somewhere deep down, they wouldn't be disturbed, right? They stopped up the windows so that no one would disturb them. And the Talmidim came to them and said to them that it's now daybreak. They came and told them. And that's why he says, Kol Oso Halayla. It was that night. It was a night of danger. Okay? It was a night of danger. That was what was going on, right? It was a night of particular danger for them. And he says like this, The and the Haggadah is telling us through this story, as Godel Kudushosam, the greatness of their holiness, or Mesiras Nafsham al Mitzvahs Hashem, and how much they gave up to keep the mitzvahs of Hashem. And they could have shortened it to save their lives. Even so, they talked about it that whole night. It was that night. That's the emphasis. So according to this explanation, I think this is very powerful. There are different Siddharim. There are years when it's easier to have that kind of sense of feeling and exuberance of the Seder and the meaning and the meaning, certainly in terms of happiness. And there are times when it's harder. And we bring the story of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva and everything else because it was a difficult Seder. It was Oso Halayla. It was that night. It was a very hard night. It was a very difficult night. And we show that by the fact they didn't even know when the morning had come, because they might have been in a dark cave somewhere, right? And therefore, the point is that this has a relevance, I think, to us as well. There is a need to understand that our ancestors have all experienced Pesach and Sidorim through difficult times in our people and our people's history. And I think that's a way of connecting. And people have different ways of connecting to the situation that's going on now. But one way of connecting to it, I think, is just stopping for a moment and thinking, yes, as a people, we have been there before, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks after us and protects us and brings us out and sees the light again. Ad shebol talmideihem v'omru, right? Rabbi Seinu Giyazman Kriyashma. The time will come, the light will come, there will be morning again. I think it's an important perspective. Second idea that's also, I think, particularly relevant to this year is the Klausenberger Rebbe's idea on Behisha Omdo. Klausenberger Rebbe says, and Klausenberger Rebbe, any idea from the Klausenberger Rebbe? We know the Klausenberger Rebbe was, you know what he went through. You heard of the Laniado Hospital in Netanya that he built after the war, and the horrific persecution that he suffered. He lost, I think, 10 children in the war, in the Holocaust, and he managed to rebuild, and a family and everything else, whatever. And quotes I've mentioned in the past, as they said to him, how do you go on? How do you keep going? You've lost so much. There's nothing, how do you keep going? And he said, I'd rather be down here with the questions than up there with the answers. That's what he used to say. Because that's what a Jew does. That's what a Jew does, right? A Jew keeps going, right? A Jew keeps going with the questions, right? That's what we do. That's our responsibility. That's our task in life. Says the Klausenberger Rebbe on V'hisha Omda. Why is it that we raise the cup of wine? He says, he says, when we raise the cup and we say, it is this that has stood us that has kept us and our ancestors. Koloma means to say, we're like drunkards sometimes, and we're like holding the cup of wine, and it's like we're almost like we're drunk. The wine symbolizes what one can do with wine, right? And so often in life, we don't actually know which way to go. We say, like a person who's drunk. They can't actually see straight. We're the same. Some we don't even know to daven. We don't know anything. We just literally do not know what to do. We can't even daven. He says that the fact that this fact has stood us in if you like, in good stead. It has kept us. It has kept us strong. The idea that this is it has kept us in one place. It kept us strong. When we hold the cup of wine, we're almost saying that the state we are in is a zchus for us, is a merit for us, right? In other words, when we are in a state where we are threatened and things are difficult and it's a difficult time for us, then the fact that when we turn around to Hashem and we say, Kodesh Baruch Hu, we can only rely on you. We don't know which way to go. We're groping like someone who's drunk. We don't know the path. We don't know how to go. And that itself can serve as a protection for us. The persecution, that means the persecution and the suffering and the difficult times we go through, that serves as a merit for us. It's almost like, because it's like an onus. We're in this place and we find it so difficult to do the right thing, because we suffer so much as a people. So the V'hisha Omda is like a hint to the times when we do not know how to move forward in life and we're stuck and everything else. And we say, Kodesh Baruch Hu, we turn to you to protect us in those situations. I think that's the idea that he's presenting. And the third idea, again, that I say is particularly relevant, I think, to this year, is the idea of on Seyul Amad. There's a Haggadah called the Chukas HaPesach, and he says that why is it that we say after V'hisha Omda, we go straight on to Lovon, right? So V'hisha Omda Lavasinu V'lonu, they always try and destroy us. The simple explanation is, this is an example, right? Every generation, look what Lovon tried to do, right? That's a simple explanation of what's going on, right? So he says that the reason why we mention Lovon is it's coming to answer a question. We've just said in every generation they come to destroy us, but we don't see it in every generation. It's not always the case. That's not a question anyone's going to ask it now, this generation. But, this is some generations, it would seem that it wasn't like that, ostensibly, okay? So the answer the Haggadah gives to this is that Hashem does hidden miracles for us in situations where we don't even know what we need to be saved from. And that is what's going on with Lovon. Because Lovon, what happened the whole episode with Lovon, if not for the fact that that Hashem himself had written in the Torah that he approached Lovon in a dream in the night when he's running after Yaakov, and he says, "Don't do anything bad to Yaakov." You would never know that was his intention. From the Torah itself, he looks quite friendly. I mean, he comes after him. He says, why does he come after him? Because he says, well, I'm going after him. Why did you run away in the middle of the night like a thief? Let's look at the dialogue between Yaakov and Lovon. That's what he says, right? We don't know he's doing anything bad, but the Torah reveals to us that Lovon had terrible intentions because Hashem has to appear in the dream in the night and says, do not do anything bad to Yaakov. So we see that's what he was intending to do. And therefore we see that even though, bringing a proof, right, from Lovon, that even though he was close to him, etc., to Yaakov was his family member, right? He had secret plans to destroy him, but Hashem saved us from his hand, right? Not to do evil to us, and that was a miracle that we didn't even know about. And every generation they turn up, they turn against us to destroy us. And I do think it's appropriate. I think it's appropriate. I think don't. You've heard bits and pieces over the last few days. We daven for more miracles, but what happened on Moshe Shabbat was a miracle. You can't sometimes everyone gathered together and we davened. And the miracle that took place with those interceptions of those missiles, I know it's easy to forget because we see all the governments talking about it and the world talking about it, so we get distracted. That's the problem we have, right? We get distracted, because we start thinking, yes, okay, but they have very good defense systems and the Iron Dome and the thing and the 3 levels and the air arrow, and it's all true. It's all true. But the chances of all of that coming together at the right time. Well, the odds, if you were betting man, right, or betting woman, you would not put your odds on that 99% interception rate or whatever it was. They interviewed a pilot, one of the F-35 pilots or whatever. There was an interview I saw somewhere about, he said something like it was Top Gun meets Star Wars. I mean, he said it was crazy. Like there was like, they're taking off on these jets and they're like these missiles everywhere. And the fact they managed to bring all of them down. Yeah, exactly. It's just the most incredible thing. It's just unbelievable. And of course, we know that there's ishtadlus. There's a need for us to get involved, and that's what was going on there. You're talking about open miracles, and you think to yourself, how many times has Hashem saved us, right? And we were given just before Pesach a window, literally a window into Hashem's protection of us. It's amazing. And just before we're going to sit down and say the night, right? Of course, we never want it to happen. We don't want to be attacked in this way. But look what Hashem is showing to us. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to us, look, I protect you all the time. Do you know how many things I've saved you from? Do you know how many things I've saved you from that you're not even aware of? And here Hashem has showed you. I'm going to show you what I'm doing for you. It's an amazing thing. I think there's a lot we need to reflect on with this. Okay, so that's the third. Again, to give thanks. Okay, so just a few more minutes. Let's just share another couple of brief ideas. Let's just see. Okay, we're going to say, okay, let's do this one. This folks, we don't want to go all the time. So the Sfas Emes has a beautiful idea on soften. Why is it that we hide the Afikomen until after the Suda? What are we doing with that? So he says that the idea of, and that word, soften, which means hidden, is meant to prepare us and fortify us for subsequent exiles. And it's a very interesting point, this very interesting theme. There is this theme that runs through the Seder, and you have to look for it. It's not so obvious. The subsequent exiles, meaning after, right, afterwards. Because I say it's subtle because Seder night is all about exile and redemption from Egypt, right? We were slaves in Egypt and we were free, and we celebrate that and everything else. But also, we know, and every year, Jews sitting at the Seder knew this and continue to know this, that there were subsequent exiles and the tortures we've suffered as a people subsequently, etc., etc. And that theme runs through the Seder in various ways. And one of those ways is this idea of the tzofan. So the Sfas Emes says, the hint is, right? It was a hint for all of the subsequent, well, redemptions, exiles and redemptions, that it will never be, it won't be actually finished. The process of Exodus does not end until the final redemption. He says that's why you don't say the whole Hallel most of Pesach. That's one idea, he says. Why don't you say the whole Hallel? You only say it the first 2 days. In Israel, they only say it the first day. Why? So the different ideas given, different things given. We have pity on the Egyptians, etc., etc. You know, there are various things given as to why we don't do this. But he says, "Sheken gulas yitzias Mitzrayim adayino nigmar," because it's not over. And that's why we can't say the whole Hallel the rest of Pesach, because that redemption and the freedom is not yet complete. We're still in a form of slavery. But every generation that passes, it gets closer to the redemption. Al-Kani says, therefore, that is why we hide away a piece of matzah to the end of the meal. L'ram is to hint, that the ultimate redemption is still hidden, but it's there, and it will be revealed. A beautiful, straightforward idea, but it's not straightforward. There's a lot of depth in it, but it's an idea that's easy to convey. Yeah, you're taking this piece of matzah, you're holding it in a bag or whatever, and you're bringing it out right at the end, because Hashem is saying to us, listen, it will come. That redemption will come. It's hidden, but it will come, and eventually it will be redeemed. Eventually it will be revealed. That makes sense? That's the Sfas Emes. And finally, just to come back to an idea of Schwab, which I think is it's beautiful, because this will help every time you say Shema. Not just on Pesach, this will help you every time you say Shema. Okay. What do we say when we last pasuk of the Shema? We say, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, asher tzeitzei eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim, lios lochem le'elokim, Ani Hashem Elokeichem. That's what we say, right? I am Hashem your God. Now, the first part is understandable. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, asher tzeitzei eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. That is, Onochi Hashem Elokecha, asher tzeitzei me'eretz Mitzrayim. That is the first of the Aseres HaDibros. That's what the parallel is, right? I am Hashem your God, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, that took you out from Egypt, right? We remember the Yitzias Mitzrayim twice a day when we say the Shema. But what is going on there? That is an open revelation of Hashem's presence, right? That's what it is. It's an open revelation. That's what it is, right? That's what we're saying. That's what happened at Har Sinai. The challenge is that for most of our history, it's not been like that. Most of our history, we are subject, it seems like we are subject to the natural order. We're in a world which follows its normal order, and the face of Hashem is veiled in many ways. We find it hard to see Hashem's hand, to understand what the plan is. And he says that that relationship and that veiled relationship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the world is expressed in the Pasuk in Tehillim, Yoshev b'seis elyon, b'tzel shakai yisleinon. Hashem dwells in secret. In shadow does Hashem dwell, right? It means the one on high dwells hidden in the shade. That means the Shekhinah is very close to us, especially when we learn Torah, when we daven, etc., etc. But we are not aware of it, because Hashem is Yoshev b'seisa. He dwells in secret. Maybe that's one idea why we say Yoshev b'seisa. Unfortunately, times of tragedy, it's said at many occasions. One of the occasions it's said is, unfortunately, at a Beis Solomon, at Levai, you say Yoshev b'seisa. Hashem dwells in secret. These are times when we feel Hashem's presence is hidden. So he says, that's why we say again, Ani Hashem Elokeichem. At the end of the pasuk, we repeat it, the Torah again, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I Hashem your God. That Hashem is telling us that when you left Egypt, through miracles, and you experienced the giving of the Torah, you will get to Eretz Yisrael, and you will have to live normal lives. You will have to live on lives on a plane that is part of the normal and natural world. And therefore Hashem says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I will always be there with you. I will always be there with you. My presence will always be there. Rav Schwab quotes Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, his great teacher and mentor, and he says that when it says, and there's a pasuk in Devarim which says, "Atem re'isem, es kol asher asa," in Devarim perek Chavtes, "Atem re'isem, you have seen es kol asher asa Hashem le'neichem be'eretz Mitzrayim. You have seen everything Hashem did to you in Egypt. The great miracles, and I took you 40 years in the desert, etc., etc. Moshe Rabbeinu ends those words, Leman Tedu, so that you shall know, Ki ani Hashem Elokeichem, the same words, that I am Hashem your God, that I am Hashem your God, right? And the idea is, because it says, so it says like this, it doesn't say, he points out like this, Rav Hirsch says like this, you would expect it to say, Leman Tedu, in order that you shall know, Ki Hashem Elokeichem. Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking. This has all happened so that you shall know that Hashem is your God, right? But he doesn't do that. He says, he then carries on with the words, Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu is still speaking, and you came to this place. So why does he say, Ani Hashem Elokeichem? So that you shall know that I am Hashem your God. So Rav Hirsch says, in just a few brief words, so that you should know that Ani Hashem is your God. Now that is the name of Hashem, the actual name of Hashem. The idea of closeness. The idea is the word Ani Hashem, that I am Hashem, as if Hashem is speaking, is Hashem saying it's not abstract. I'm not some abstract idea and concept and philosophy that is distinct and different and far away from you. I am present. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. I am present in your lives. Even when you are through your normal lives and you're experiencing things and challenges and everything else, you need to know that I am present and I'm here with you at that time. And that's why Rav Schwab understands that we conclude the Shema in that way. And it's a beautiful, beautiful arc, if you like, from the idea and crossing that bridge from the Haggadah, which is conveying a series of immense miracles that sometimes we find hard almost to imagine, right? To the lives we live in now and the depth of what we sometimes experience and the high points and the low points and everything else. But when we think of the Haggadah in this way, we think of the way we journey through the Haggadah, think of that soft and the fact that the matzah is hidden, it will be revealed, that the redemption will come, all these things together. And we think, and we say this every time we say the Shema, we end with this. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Hashem says, I'll be with you through the times of difficulty as well as the times of happiness. So we should only know good things, Be'ez Hashem. We should hear only good tidings, B'seres Tovos, and we should have a wonderful, wonderful Yom Tov. Thank you for joining. Hey. Thank you.